It's an honor to be back this year, and I always love being here. I got to be here 2 years virtually before I got to be here in person, and last year was a joy. I'm really thrilled to be back. Gothenburg is such a wonderful city, and Patrick and his team are such incredible hosts. Can we give a huge round of applause to them for this incredible event? Fantastic. It takes a lot to put on events like this, and they should be celebrated because they're the core of our community. And I want to start today talking about a little history. And, my friend in the bottom right on the slide up there was a historian. He has a forthcoming book on the history of computing, and I felt that no better tribute could be paid than to provide some solid history on managed Apple accounts. And so I want to do a short history of managed Apple accounts starting in 2000, because on January 5th of 2000, Apple introduced iTools, which gave us all our email accounts. I'm still tom_bridge@mac.com, which I registered on January 5th, 2000. And those accounts are where this all starts in a lot of ways. And, in 2002, this gets rebranded as .Mac, and there were no major changes, just a name change. It goes through several of those over the years. And then in 2003, the iTunes Store begins to exist, and your Apple account can now buy things. In a lot of ways, this is the original sin of the of the Apple account, but it gave us the ability to buy things like music and movies and even music videos. 4 years later, we get the iPhone, and the iPhone gives you a purpose for your Apple account in your pocket. More than just your iPod. It ties you to your individual device. It helps you do all of those wonderful things. In 2008, we get the App Store, and you can start to use that Apple account to buy more things on your phone, like apps developed by independent software manufacturers as well as big companies. In 2010, we get the ability as organizations to register Apple IDs and start to use our business dollars for things instead of having to give people an iTunes card with $25 on it, which you use to buy corporate things, which you could then never recover. On a scale of 0 to bad, those were the bad times. That was in the pre-2010 days, things were definitely a lot more challenging. In 2014, device enrollment program debuts, and we get an Apple account to set up along with your business details to align those business devices to your MDM and things along those lines to do automated device enrollment for the first time, although at the time it was called the Device Enrollment Program. In 2018, Apple Business Manager coalesces that VPP store and the Apple Business Manager, and the Apple Deployment Programs portal to create a single source of truth for your business. And in 2023, we got the ability to federate those managed Apple IDs with pretty much any IDP that meets certain criteria. Prior to that, you could do that, as we learned the other day, with Active Directory in the cloud, Azure Active Directory, not on-prem, Mr. Dreyer. But the other option was Google Workspace. And in a lot of these things, corporate identity started to take a front seat with the Apple accounts that are out there. So there is our short history. This was compiled largely from Charles' History of Computing podcast. I was going to say, my friend is helping me even now. So I wanted to start with a quick flashback. Last year at Macaduck in London, Jeremy Butcher got up on stage and said that separating a managed key store from the user key store on a mobile device or other places is a challenge on a deep technical level. He said that use cases for that key store are certainly interesting, and there are deeper architectural issues at play. This is a complicated subject, he said. So what did we take away from what Mr. Butcher said? We heard this isn't happening right now. What he meant was this is happening in exactly 3 weeks. So it is very important that the lesson that we take away from that is listen to what's being said out loud, but recognize that what you take away from a conversation may not be what was intended. Difficult. So with that, we're going to talk about managed Apple IDs. Oh. No, we're going to talk about Ma and Pa. We're going to talk about managed Apple accounts and personal Apple accounts. This is American Gothic painted by Grant Wood in 1930, which hangs in the Art Institute of Chicago. But we're not here to talk about art today. We're here to talk about managed Apple accounts. Threat or menace? No, actually, we're not here to talk about threat or menace. We're going to say, will I need a psychiatrist? And the answer is yes, probably, but not for this. The other question is, how much messing around is there going to be with this? And the answer is a lot. But really, we're here to say managed Apple accounts and the wary Mac admin. It is understandable to be wary of this subject. It is also incredibly important to the future of your organization. So time to pay attention. Sorry about the hangover, but that's okay. We all feel a little hungover when we're talking about managed Apple accounts right now. All right, so here's our quick agenda today. We're going to talk about what they are, what they're for, why you should federate, who you can federate to, when you should consider doing all of this, and where is all of this going? So, what's a managed Apple account? Well, as you might imagine, it is a tool for the organization. On the left-hand side, you'll see Apple Business Manager. In the middle, you'll see your iPhone. Granted, I'm going to talk mostly about mobile devices today and not your Mac, but there are applications for your desktop operating systems as well. And of course, there's iCloud there to hold it all together. So, when we start thinking about what the use cases are for managed Apple accounts today, I'm going to need $1 to the Mac Admins Foundation for every time I do that today. Someone will get me the tally at the end of the conference here. The really important part of all of this is that managed Apple IDs are incredibly helpful for holding things together and providing you entree to corporate resources. One of those important corporate resources that you have is your mobile device management solution. And being able to essentially gate access to a user enrollment for MDM to keep your personal applications away from your work applications and vice versa, you can have an opportunity to really kind of push forward your mobile environment because people really want to be productive no matter where they are, and you are responsible for keeping that data safe. So how do you do that? And the answer is user enrollment for iOS. So what can managed Apple accounts do? They can sign into Apple services. They can anchor an iCloud keychain with passkeys as of this past year. They can support continuity features like handoff. And they can sign into third-party services, as we learned yesterday. You can use sign in with Apple with your business account, and those work just fine. There's more about sign in with Apple on their website. You can also perform a user enrollment for BYOD, which is to say personally owned iOS devices. You can back up iOS devices up to 5 gigs and use iCloud Drive up to 5 gigs. And you can gain access to key resources like developer tools. You can hold identities and cards in Wallet. But, the important thing here, and I don't think my slide fully built, is that, of course, all of these come with asterisks associated with it. If you want more than 5 gigs of storage, I have some very bad news for you. May I suggest working in education where you get 200 instead? If you need access to some of these things online, that can be a little trickier. So, be aware there are some sharp edges. You do have to hold it carefully. So let's talk about what's new in managed Apple accounts this year. Worldwide Developers Conference this summer gave us a lot of goods to bring to the table here. So there were changes in managed Apple accounts. Activation lock can now be cleared in AXM. So I was going to say a huge round of applause so that you don't have to talk to Apple to get your own devices unlocked. Yay. In addition, Apple announced that you can prevent new personal Apple account You can prevent new personal Apple account creation after doing the domain verification, but before doing the IDP setup. I was hoping to have a lot more to share with you about that today. Sadly, I do not. We'll talk more about that in a minute. You can also allow only managed Apple accounts to be created with your domain, and you can migrate existing personal Apple accounts under certain scenarios to be managed Apple accounts. This account transfer process will give you the opportunity to decide during a migration into managed Apple IDs for your domain whether or not certain corporate accounts that you probably told your people to create with their company email address for the use of iCloud services, Apple developer services, those kind of services can be permanently and irrevocably converted to be a managed Apple account. There are sharp edges here. We'll find out where they are when we can hold it. So how will this work? We're learning, but all is not clear yet. We can now do those activation unlocks in Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager, and yay, we all give that a huge round of applause because it's really awesome and it saves us a lot of time on the phone. So how will the processes here engage? How can we engage with them? We're still finding out. So there are some blockers that we can find for creating or for converting an existing personal account into being a managed Apple account. The one that I know indicates strong personal use of an Apple ID is the creation of an Apple card. And so if you have an Apple credit card, that is a strong indication that this is a personal account, and they won't even offer you to migrate. That will be something where you have to convert that away from your current domain. GXS accounts are another thing that I believe currently are a blocker for managed Apple accounts. We're still finding out what all the details are here. And this is one place where we are hoping, and I understand more documentation is coming. But as these features come to be more prevalent, we will understand what they look like. So that is what a managed Apple account is. Let's talk about what they're for. Here are things that you can do with a managed Apple account today. So again, you can do an account-driven device enrollment, which doesn't get you to supervised on iOS, but does on macOS. And you can use your managed Apple account to enroll your device into a chosen MDM. You can do an account-driven user enrollment, which is a privacy-preserving enrollment meant for a personally owned device that you can conduct so that you can receive corporate data on your device in a protected volume that is separate from your personal data. In addition, you can collaborate using iCloud with your company. You can power company identity and authentication with iCloud Keychain for your company. Again, asterisk there too. Provided that it fits into 5 gigs per account, or you use Apple Business Essentials. Any Apple Business Essentials customers in the room? Oh, come on. I know that there are some out there. So in addition, it's also possible that you can have more storage for this using Apple School Manager. And so education environments are slightly different, and these Apple ID accounts are more creative, and certainly more capable. In addition, there's an important caveat about iCloud Keychain that needs to be discussed. The first iCloud account that registers on your device may have an iCloud Keychain. The first. Subsequent Apple IDs that are registered either through account-driven user enrollment or other processes will not receive an iCloud Keychain of their own. This is a shortcoming that I hope is remedied in future versions of iOS and macOS, but today, the first iCloud account is what gets that managed iCloud, that iCloud keychain, and it may or may not be your managed device. This may cause you some trouble as you try to use those handoff and continuity features. So be aware that if you were hoping to have your personal phone be a continuity device for your work laptop, ne'er the twain shall meet unless you do things in the right order. Today, correct. On October the 4th, 2024, for those of you watching at home later. All right, I want to talk about account-driven enrollment types because this is a really important conversation. There are 2 types of account-driven enrollments: user enrollment for personal devices and device enrollment for company devices. Both of these solutions require a managed Apple account. You cannot do this with a personal Apple account. It must be your company's managed Apple account. It requires what's called a well-known endpoint. For example, if you're sitting in front of your laptop right now and you want to put in an address, you can go to afcr.co.uk/.well-known/com.apple.remote management. and you will see the file that represents that well-known endpoint. It provides to the device a place to get an enrollment profile. That domain is crucial to your sign-in process. We'll talk more about that in a second. There are limited commands and functions available to user enrollment for MDM, and that's what we'll be talking about in just a minute. For account-driven device enrollments, the same first two things are true. Requires a managed Apple account, requires that well-known endpoint on your website. And then you get a standard device enrollment that happens at that time. You can erase the device, you can unenroll the device, you can restart or shut down the device. You have remarkably substantial control of those devices at that time. It's not perfect. There are still some things that require supervision on iOS in specific, which does require automated device enrollment and not an account-driven device enrollment. All right, so account-driven enrollments have full data separation with a separate APFS volume for anything that happens in those device enrollments. That means that you get another APFS container on your device for that enrollment, and anything that comes through that enrollment will be in that APFS container. It also means that when you sign out of that managed Apple account, that APFS container is gone. Permanently gone. On sign out, unenroll, and delete all MDM data and applications are gone through that functionality at that point. So when you sign out, that data is gone forever, and your company is probably really thrilled with you right now, provided that didn't have someone's key work that wasn't backed up in other ways. However, we'll talk a little bit more about iCloud backup for those things as well, because there is a viable solution there. There are also limits for application management that are associated with all of these things. This one's really exciting for me because it means that any application that I put into that container can come out of that container later and just be destroyed very, very quickly. I have no access to the things that were put in that container by me, the admin, later. So let's walk through what a user enrollment looks like. I mean, this is the future for device enrollment that is not ADE. So we better understand it. There are 4 stages of account-driven enrollment. You'll notice I'm not saying account-driven user enrollment or device enrollment. This is true for all of the enrollment types. The first stage is, in fact, denial. The second is grief. The third, no, we're not going to talk about Kubler-Ross today. The first stage is service discovery. Where do I go? The second stage is user enrollment. Who are you? The third stage is a session token, which is essentially, here, take this. Then you get the MDM enrollment portion. Now you're set up, now you're complete, now you're up and running. I would like to thank Apple for providing excellent documentation and graph diagrams for all of these things. These are from the Apple Platform Deployment Guide. I strongly recommend that you have the APD bookmarked in your bar. It should maybe be second or third. I was going to say first is probably your own space, but second or third after that, you need this. For those unfamiliar with these kinds of diagrams, we have 4 different lines here. They indicate traffic. They do not indicate directionality. They're all about how you get from place to place. At the beginning, the user will start on their device, and they will go to the settings application on their phone, go to general, go to VPN and device management. At that point, they'll be prompted to sign in. That's the first step. The device will use the email address that is provided by the user to determine what happens next. It goes and gets that well-known URL and retrieves from the file that was resultant an MDM enrollment URL. It will make a first enrollment attempt, and the server will say, no. It will say 401, not authorized. So today we're going to be talking about Sam. Sam Obasanya is a striker on the AFC Richmond Greyhounds and our tenant for today. So Sam has an email address, sam@afcr.co.uk. The well-known URL for this will come from his domain. So at afcr.co.uk, we're going to get and build this well-known URL. This is something that Apple does for us automatically. It is something you are responsible for, which is putting a a JSON file at this location, or having a service that will redirect that to create that JSON file for you. The device will then go to that URL with a couple of query parameters attached. Oh, and you can see I botched the user identifier on my slide. I'll have to fix that later. But it will provide me information about the device at that point. And it will say model-family iPhone, because I'm doing this from my phone. The device will receive back an array that looks like this. It has a base URL, in this case, apple.mdm.jumpcloud.com/user-enroll, with an organization parameter submitted along with it. And it has a version. This says MDM-BYOD. That implies that this is a user enrollment for personally owned devices. The device at that time will then post a request to that URL. And it will say, this is an English language device. This is an iPhone 18, 1, which is an iPhone 18 Pro, or 16 Pro. It will also give the operating system version of the device at that time. In the case that you are doing a device enrollment, this is what you would submit instead, which would be a version of MDM-ADDE and perhaps a different base URL. You may have multiple different environments depending upon what you are serving. You may need to build a service to fit this JSON, or your MDM provider will need to do that for you. May I suggest the latter? In this case, the flow is exactly the same. We're going to send that enrollment parameter. We're going to send that XML plist that's going to tell us everything that the MDM needs to know. What happens next, which is to say post-service discovery, what happens next depends on your MDM. So, remember when last we left our Intrepid hero, we'd gotten that 401 and we have to do something about it. That 401 request is going to tell the device what to do next. It's going to tell the client, hey, I need you to go get a WebAuth session. I need you to go authenticate to that MDM and prove that you are who you say you are. And the server will, at that point, supply an authentication form back to the client. The client will then show that form to the user, and the user will complete the form, the device will post it back to the server, and we'll get an authentication result one way or the other. God willing and the creek don't rise, the user will remember their password correctly, and we will get through that process. What happens next is based on the easy way. There's the easy way, and then there's the IDP way. So the easy way is that the client will do a second enrollment attempt now that it has an open session with that WebAuth, and the device will receive the enrollment profile. At that point, the device prompts the user to sign in with their managed Apple account. And they will enter their credentials directly on the device. That client will then present those credentials to Apple directly, and it will get an OK if that all works appropriately. They will sign in with iCloud and iTunes at that time, install the enrollment profile, which prompts for the PIN, and at the conclusion of that process, you are enrolled. You'll notice that we are at step 20. This goes a lot faster in reality, but this is the whole process diagram. Every part of this might go wrong. You need to know where it is. So, I want to talk about the IDP way now, because this is something that, who here has an IDP in your organization? Every hand in this room went up. Good for you, thank you. I work for an IDP, so I'm very sensitive about this. I really like everybody to have an IDP. Would you like a second? Come talk to me. After we have gotten to that 401 initially, the IDP mechanism is actually a little bit more interesting. You'll notice here that we now have an OAuth 2 IDP in the middle between Apple and the server. The idea here is that you can provide your IDP a way to authenticate that user so that you can make sure that they are who they say they are, even if they haven't federated their Apple ID yet. So, in this case, the client makes the authentication request of the IDP and not the server. The IDP sends back that authorization form. They do the show form, complete form, post form, authorization response, dance. And at the conclusion of that box step, there's a token exchange. That token is your new bearer token for conducting communications around all of these things. Then the second enrollment attempt is made, the enrollment profile is delivered, and then we do the managed Apple ID process. You will notice that once again, the client auth happens between the client and Apple. At that point, if you are working in a federated environment, there is a second trip to the IDP as well to authenticate your managed Apple account. And then you conclude again with sign in with iCloud and iTunes, install the enrollment profile, and everybody goes home happy. Again, 22 steps in this one, but it's much faster than it thinks. So now we do it live. All right. Who thinks the demo gods are with me today? All right. Let's see. Can I move this? Where'd it go? Why can't I drag? All right. Let's see here. Oh, right. There we go. Now I need to get this video over here. All right. So here we are. You can see it's 9:41. Oh, 20 minutes early. That's right. Screen capture time. Okay. So here we are on Tom Bridges' iPhone. We're going to sign in with Sam. So here you can see I'm already signed in with my iCloud account. And we're going to go down here to General. And in General, towards the bottom is VPN and device management. We're going to sign in to a work or school account, sam@afcr.co.uk. You can see that we've been redirected to Jump Cloud to do this process. I'm going to say continue with Sam. This is my IDP handling the authorization at this time. It's login 2024 with an exclamation point at the end. I wanted to make it easy to type. All right, iCloud for work. Sign into the iCloud account provided by your organization to access these features. Storage for work, iCloud collaboration, work your notes. I'll sign into iCloud. Now, this is just a managed Apple account without federation today. It could be a federation process, so you'll see I will go through the standard two-factor here. And now I'm enrolling in the managed device. This may take a few minutes to configure your iPhone. It's actually pretty quick. We'll wait for that to complete ever so politely.
Are you really doing this live?
I'm doing this live. This is totally live. Here you can see I'm going to restore my work apps and data. And so if I had a managed data that was in my iCloud container, off we go. And now I am fully signed in and device managed at this time. This is a device that is now in my environment. You can see that I'm getting apps already. I'm about to get Google Chrome, and then I think it's going to prompt me for Google Edge or for Microsoft Edge as well. And then once those are there, I can go to my app library on the end, and we'll see them in recently added as soon as they start to download, just like they did up in the upper right. And so those apps will probably not download because I'm on the cellular. But if I say using data roaming, I can download them now. There we go. And we've conducted a managed Apple account enrollment using account-driven user enrollment. This is now a user-enrolled device. Now, the other thing that it's important to recognize is that, Sam can go in and sign out whenever he's done. And so, I was going to say, at this point, we can sign out of that managed account, and everything associated with your business environment at that point goes poof, gone. So at the conclusion there, we can go back to the app library. Those apps that are waiting to be downloaded are gone. So a lot to be excited about here. This is a really great experience for a lot of organizations to be able to yep, we can put your stuff on there. All right. So we need to understand what our limits are here. What you can do as an admin with a user-enrolled device is dramatically different than what you can do with a device-managed device. And it's drastically awesome, if I'm honest. User-enrolled MDM is privacy-preserving. As an admin, I can only see what I put there. I do not need to know that my staff are in a rock band and are karaoke heroes on the weekend. I do not need to know that they are incredibly good at curling. I do not need to know that they are bad at golf. These are things I, as the admin, do not need to know. And therefore, I cannot know them in user-enrolled environments, because what happens on the device is only about the work stuff that you can put there. That's great. And it also means that your user can trust that you can't see their stuff. That's what's nerve-wracking about these processes. And so you can do that privacy-preserving enrollment without compromising your management plane, which is really exciting. Both sides get to hold some trust in the other party without giving up their privacy. You can say that the company's data privacy is handled and easily processed, because as soon as you unenroll that device, or as soon as the user unenrolls that device, all the company data goes away. You also have the ability to gate access to specific Apple services based on device management status, and it still preserves the ownership of that data in the correct way. So we need to talk about the important elephant in the room, and that's the 20-60-20 curve. So if you think about BYO programs, they're going to be your favorite people on the left, and the people on the right who you understand but are probably never going to do what you want. These are the always and the never folks. Some folks are going to do whatever you ask of them. You could ask them to, enroll their device while doing a handstand in the middle of a bridge over the river, and they will walk out to the bridge, do the handstand, and enroll their device right there while you watch. These are your favorite people, but maybe not for the reasons you think. So in the middle, though, are the people who are skeptical of this environment. And they're the maybe folks. This is the said group of people that you have to convince that this is okay and, in fact, good. And the answer on how you do that is you do that by talking to them, showing them things, and being upfront and honest about what you can and can't do. So the process of taking a personal device and making it work-enabled is all about trust. So what you may know as the end user is that your serial number starts with XHF, and your phone number is 1-571-243-3555, and your MAC address is 020340CBBC01. You know all of those things about your phone because it's your phone. You also know that you put Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Huvo, Airbnb, and 1Password on there. Your MDM only knows that it has an enrollment ID. Doesn't have the serial number, doesn't have the phone number, doesn't have the MAC address of the device. You have none of that information as the MDM. You only know that you put Google Drive on there, Jump Cloud Protect, Jira, Confluence, Easy Receipts, Expensify, all the things that they need to do their corporate job. You know the status of those things. You don't know their phone number, you don't know any of the other information. That's private and not for you. What your MDM may do in user enrollment comes down to 6 or 7 policies and some app deployment techniques. You get to keep your work apps separate. They go into that APFS container we talked about. You can set a 6-digit non-simple PIN. That's the policy you get to set. You do not get to say complex PIN with 3 numbers, 2 characters, an upper and lower case, and an emoji. You don't get to set that. You can control their ability to take screenshots. Because again, we want to make sure our data stays private. And in those cases, if you set a no screenshots policy, system-wide, you cannot take screenshots. You can say that no pasteboard access exists across the management boundary, so that if apps are deployed as managed applications via your MDM, they cannot pass data to unmanaged applications. You also have the ability to say that unmanaged data cannot go to managed data. Which of those you select is in your control. You can also control whether or not pasteboard from the copy-paste menu is included in that. You get to delete managed things at unenrollment time, and you get to apply accounts via the native Apple MDM controls into that managed container. So that you can say, here's an Exchange account, or a Google account, or an IMAP account, and that work account goes into the managed container and is a managed destination. On the application management front, your MDM may send, but not replace, managed applications. Which is to say, if I have a company need to deploy an application, but the user has already downloaded that application, That is an unmanaged application on their device, and you cannot send a management command to steal it. You've got to tell your user, hey, I know you already downloaded the Exchange app or the Outlook app for iOS. Can I have you delete that, please, so that I can send you the corporate copy? This is a shortcoming, I think, of user enrollment in a lot of ways. It's not a deal breaker. This is something your organization can work around. This is the formal link from the APD, and I, like Mr. Dreyer, also promise that this is not a Rickroll. And so you can view this table as part of the Apple Platform Deployment Guide with what MDM can do and what MDM cannot do. You're going to need a communication strategy for how you deal with this problem. You are going to need to make people comfortable early with why they want to do this and why they want to enroll their personal device in your MDM at work. And the answer is, because you can trust us. If they don't trust you, they're not going to do this. Even Gesundheit, even the always folks may be a little skeptical at that point. And the never folks are going to be really loud about it. So you need to make it very clear what you can and can't do. You need to be able to demonstrate what you can see so they can see and believe. You need to clarify your Apple account plan, and you need to provide utility and usefulness to them using this service. If you do not provide utility or usefulness via your tool, guess what, friends? They're not going to do it for fun. So, if you haven't been through the domain claim process, I want to walk you through what that looks like using Apple Business or School Manager. Here in the domain section of the Managed Apple ID section, or Managed Apple Account section of Apple Business Manager, although I don't think they've renamed it yet. I think it's still technically listed as Managed Apple IDs. Here you can see that I have a couple of domains. I'm going to add one here, so I'm going to click Add Domain. I'm then going to enter a domain, tombridge.com, and I'm going to claim it. At that point, you're going to be in a state where this is in process. Hey, we're not done yet. You need to do something. You need to click Verify. And for my unverified domain, I'm going to get that string out of here, and I'm going to make a TXT record at my DNS server. Once I've made my TXT record, this is Hover, and so once I'm in Hover and I have placed my text record in place, Apple will verify that that record loads, and at the conclusion, you now have a verified domain. This is the point at which sometime in the future, you will be able to say, and now, don't make any more personal Apple IDs on this domain. That day is not today, but I'm told that day is soon. So if you have yet to verify your domain in Apple Business Manager, now's a really great time. If you have many domains, now's a really great time. There are a lot of really good reasons to verify your domain so that you are in control of everything that happens next. So what was that about capturing accounts? How will this work? Great question. Not sure yet. Not entirely. But what about now? How does takeover work? Again, great question. We're not sure yet. A couple banana peels out on this one. I'm really hopeful that in the future we're going to be able to talk a lot more about these processes and demonstrate them. So in the future, we'll have a lot more to say about how this is going to work and what that process feels like. And here are the sharp edges. Come back next year. We'll talk more about it in 2025. So in the process of claiming a domain, there are also points at which you may be able to start to federate authentication. And you may want to start to encourage your users who have personal Apple accounts on your domain to maybe not have those personal accounts on your domain anymore. This is what it looks like when you start that process. It sends an email to everyone with a personal Apple account on your domain. Everyone, including your CEO, their friends who have Apple accounts on your domain. This is the scary point at which you have to trust that you have a good process and a good communication strategy, because you have all of those things, right? Yeah, you have all of those things. This email says that you must choose a different email address to continue using this Apple ID. Again, sorry, it's Apple account now. Your data and purchases will not be affected by this change, which is to say they will still be associated with this Apple account. Update your Apple account at appleid.apple.com or on any of your macOS or iOS devices where you're signed into iCloud. And they can click more, learn more, and be directed to Apple K-Base articles. This is what they'll see when they have to update their Apple account. And so here, starting August 10th, 2024, you will no longer be able to use primary admin at afcr.co.uk as your Apple ID. Enter a new email address to use as your Apple ID. Not on your domain. New email address can't be on this domain. No touchy. Corporate data lives here now. And so that's what the process looks like. And then at the conclusion, your Apple ID has been updated. From now on, sign into your account with AFC primary admin at iCloud.com. So I've traded this account and put it over on iCloud.com, or if I have a personal domain for other things, you can do that. You can migrate it anywhere, just not here or any other domain that's been claimed by somebody else. This is what that email process looked like. You can see that I go all the way back to June 11th when I started this process, and I've gotten emails every week during that process that says, hey, you need to update your Apple ID. You know, you really need to update your Apple ID. Have you heard about my car warranty? I need you to update your Apple ID. Sorry, you guys probably don't get those calls here. That's probably only a US thing. That didn't translate. Sorry, everybody. But at the conclusion of that process, you get your Apple ID information has been updated. And now, the Apple ID lives someplace else now. It's now a personal account someplace else. This is what those addresses looked like on June 11, 2024. They had changed since May. So I was going to say, this is what you need to search for in your email logs as an organization to find out who still has primary Apple accounts, because Apple will not tell you if there is a personal Apple account on your domain. Won't tell you. You've got to figure it out for yourself. So if you're searching for strings, search for Apple ID at apple.com or update Apple ID in the subject field. Now you can see that I have a verified domain, and you can see that I still have one username conflict here, and I have 36 days remaining. And so here you can track your progress and see who's still causing you trouble. So why would you want to do any of this federation stuff? I want to talk really, really quickly about OpenID Connect and System for Cross-Identity Management and Shared Signals Framework. This is going to speed run this whole process. Come talk to me later if you've got questions. Okay, in the beginning there was the password, and we realized very quickly that we had made a terrible mistake. Passwords to various sites are just strings that anyone can know. And that's either good or bad, depending on how good or bad your people are at keeping secrets. We need to talk, though, about the difference between authentication, auth-N, or authorization, auth-Z. The difference in the question is, who are you, and do you belong here? Those are two separate questions that are related, that both start with auth. And so we conflate them all the time. They are two separate questions, though. Who are you? Can you prove it? And do you belong here? Are you sure? So in auth-N, that's what a password's for, or a passkey, or an identity certificate, or a PIN, or a hardware token. That's a way of saying that this is Tom Bridge, or Sam Obisanya, or Joel Rennick. Authorization can be based on your group membership. It can be based on application permissions. It can be based on time of access. It can be based on contextual awareness, which is the concrete sum of all of those things. Federation, though, is all about context and control. It is importantly about centralizing those things together. It is a single user and authentication source for all of your applications. It's about grouping those users and providing richer data for decision-making by a major business logic engine called your IDP. It allows you to allow or deny access based on the rules such as who you are, what you're doing, when you're doing it, and where you are. Of course, all of this requires that your application supports external IDP folks, and maybe hopefully don't make you pay the SSO tax for connecting these things together. So the question is, when should you federate? That's a bigger question. I'm not going to answer it for you, except to say the sooner you get on the process of doing it, the sooner that process will be over, and that is helpful to recognize. So keeping control for the business is all about how you federate that domain for managed Apple accounts. Here are the benefits for you for federating. Account creation using your domain is limited to Apple Business Manager, pure and simple. That is the only place that people can get managed Apple accounts now. Any Apple account, not personal, but now they're all managed. You can create accounts using an external directory via Skim. You can know who has a company domain Apple account, which you did not know prior to today. And then password resets can flow through your help desk or directory, not through only the people who have ABM, because a broader swath of your organization may have IDP access to do a password reset more than the folks who just have access to AXM for the purposes of authentication. So there's some stuff you have to deal with during federation, and that is that Apple IDs created before federating have a time they can hang around. Right now, that's 60 days. In the future, it will be 30 days, but today it is 60 days. They will have to change their identity, and you still don't have any control over whatever is in there. But chances are it's a personal Apple account, and that's not your problem. If it was a work account, in the future, you'll be able to convert that account to being a managed Apple account, provided it doesn't have any of the hangups that we don't know about yet. This whole process currently takes 60 days to complete. So the answer to the question is, when should you start federating? The answer was 60 days ago, probably. And the second best time is right now. The third best time is obviously when your change controls calendar will permit you to do so, and that is probably the better answer. And you have no way to know who has these accounts before you start. That is maybe one of the bigger obstacles that you have to deal with out there. All right, so here's the federation timeline. You verify your domain via DNS record changes. You begin that federation process. You resolve the Apple ID conflicts, and again, up to 60 days are required today, 30 days in the future. Then you will finalize that federation process, and then you will configure provisioning using Skim. And then you can begin your program. So again, planning matters, this process matters, but the good news is, if you start your comm strategy now, when we go to that federation process, and you warn people that they need to move their stuff to other places, you have a coherent communication strategy throughout, and this will absolutely matter to you. So who can you federate to? Until this past January, the answer was Google or Azure Active Directory / Entra ID. Now, anybody who has OpenID Connect and Shared Signals Framework can do this today. So how does federation work? OpenID Connect, so this is a fun one. The genesis of OpenID Connect as an authentication technology dates back to 2005, when Brad Fitzpatrick at LiveJournal, yes, LiveJournal was in fact good for something, got us the ability to connect two services based on the same protocol, so that authentication to one could be authentication to the other without having to share secrets behind the scenes. If we think about this virtuous cycle of managed Apple accounts where user accounts come from your directory and then are authenticated by Apple using that directory, we have to do all of that with OpenID Connect. This process is pretty straightforward. Your user will go to Apple Business Manager to sign in. They will be redirected to your directory to complete that sign-in process via an authentication process. And at the conclusion, the directory will give the relying party a thumbs up at that conclusion of that process. Isn't this just more passwords, though? No, it's not. It's tokens. OpenID tokens are not exactly passwords. They're credentials, but they are not passwords. On a successful authentication, you will get an ID token that says who you are, and you will get an access token, which is an encrypted blob. The ID tokens say who you actually are to the directory, and those access tokens, they're like, subway token. You put it on you put it in the thing, and you go through the turnstile, and that tells you who you are. On a successful authorization, when you hand over that access token that says, I'm Tom Bridge, here's my token, you get a managed cookie at that point, a session cookie, which gives you access to the service, and you get another access token that's good for later, in case you have to come back. Most access tokens are ever good once. They're use and destroy. And most access tokens get you another access token for next time. That's how you keep the virtuous cycle going without having to fully re-authenticate every time. This identity token has a whole big JSON structure. And you can see a whole bunch of information about that given spot. And I use the DC driver's license sample image here. Thomas Alexander sample card, who lives at 1234 Commodore Joshua Barney Drive, Northeast in Washington, D.C. And so the identity token that we get back out of that ID that I get, has all of the useful information plus some signing information and some authentication information so that I can prove that that's legit. So if you're thinking to yourself, Thomas, I just got over my overwhelming fear of Kerberos, and these look like TGTs, and you're triggered right now, we're going to take a deep 6-second pause. And we're going to let it all go. Because since you don't have to do your own DNS for this, it's not scary. Briefly, we need to talk about shared signals framework, because this is a draft specification that is in the middle of all of these things. Shared signals framework, is yet unratified, and so it's kind of a draft specification. Apple's on the early side of this. The idea here is that there are shared signals that you can provide between disparate organizations to provide information about threat data or about other important objects that happen during the lifespan of an account. So in this case, we have a user with a password, a directory, and Apple. A user may go to their directory and say, I want to change my password. The directory can then tell Apple over shared signals framework, Thomas Sample Card changed his password just now. And the device can tell, or the Apple can tell their device, hey, sign in again with their managed Apple ID. Make sure that's still him. Please, pretty please. In addition, your admin can go in and tell the directory, user suspended. And the directory can then, over the shared signals framework connection between the two organizations, say, Thomas Sample Card has been suspended just now. We can prompt the device to sign in again, and when they can't, destroy the MDM connection. So suspending the directory user could have the effect, depending on your environment, of unenrolling their device. Which means when the user departs or is suspended for malfeasance or suspended for fun, the account evaporates and they can no longer talk to the device. So what do you need to federate with OpenID Connect? You need to get some stuff. You need to get some stuff from your IDP for Apple Business Manager. You need to get some stuff from your Apple Business Manager for your IDP. These are a process that every IDP will have to adapt to, and it's pretty straightforward if you've done this before. If you've connected an application to a directory, the steps are pretty common. You're going to want a way to create a lot of managed Apple accounts very fast. Skim is that way for you. In this case, your IDP becomes the relying party and Apple becomes the identity party. So it's like everybody switches hats. And at that part, the user will be registered by the IDP, provided that that account will now exist over at the IDP, or the identity party, which is ABM. And at the end of that process, your user will exist in both places. So what do you need to use Skim with Apple Business Manager? You're going to give from your IDP a client secret and identifier to Apple, and you're going to get a redirect URL from Apple for your IDP. So again, we've set these two things up as a virtuous cycle. There are cycles within cycles at this point. And going through that process is going to be pretty straightforward. You're just going to step through all of the spots in your IDP where you set these things up. At this point, we'll have set up the OpenID Connect connection between Apple Business Manager and Jump Cloud, and then we'll go do the identity management portion. We'll get that callback URL directly from Apple. We'll put that in we'll put our API URL directly into Apple Business Manager from Jump Cloud. And at the end of the process, you end up with a callback URL at Apple Business Manager and a client ID that goes along with that. You then have to actually go through and create a client secret. Good news, you can create more than one, so you can have an overlapping set of credentials. So do it every 6 months, but make them last for a year and you'll never run out. Once you have a client secret in that environment, you paste it back and authenticate back via your Apple Business Manager environment to Jump Cloud. And then once you have that client secret in place, you can create a second one. So some takeaways as I go really fast because I'm almost out of time. This isn't something you're going to do by accident or quickly. You will need to plan this. Spend time with the documentation and learn. There are really great reasons, though, to have managed Apple accounts in your organization, and that user enrollment is part of it. And getting to do a user enrollment gives you corporate data on personal iPhones without worry, provided your MDM is up to snuff. When you do all of this, federate your identity back over to your IDP. And if you don't have a test domain to start playing with in your IDP and at Apple Business Manager, domains are cheap. Buy one, start playing. Verify it, federate it, learn what that process looks like. And last but not least, please file feedback to make your use cases better. All right, speaking of feedback, I would like yours. Mr. Dreyer posted a survey up yesterday from the Mac Admins Foundation. We are very interested in your experience in our community. Who here has an account on the Mac Admins Slack? Many hands go up. How many folks, again, are new to this conference this year? A lot of hands go up. Welcome. We're glad you're here. As a community, we do better when we are smarter together. And we get smarter together by listening to your feedback about what it's like to be a member of our community. Please, please, please tell us. We are also going to be doing focus groups after the survey completes, and we want to talk to people from all over. So please, let us know. We would love to talk with you more. The foundation needs your support, and we thank you. So with that, I think I'm done.